It was an advance that hoped to turn the tide of the conflict. A Ukrainian offensive in the Kursk region 6 months ago brought the war onto Russian soil. Yesterday, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy honoured the soldiers who fought on the front line. But the president now faces new challenges with the dawn of a new Trump administration. To date, the US has been the largest provider of military assistance in Ukraine. But Trump has inherited the war at a time of instability, and as Ukraine is losing ground. And its continuing support could be the difference between victory or defeat.
If there is a confrontation, God forbid, between Ukrainian stand and American stand, I don't even want to think about it, then Putin is the only one who wins from it. Putin's victory is the loss of the Western world, both Europe and the United States.
Holding Russian territory, however small, will be a valuable asset in any peace talks. But sitting down with ITV in Kyiv, President Zelenskyy warned he would not accept a ceasefire without guarantees that Ukraine would be protected in the future.
A frozen conflict will lead to Putin coming back again with his aggression. Who will then be receiving prizes? Who will then make history as a winner? No one. And that will be a loss to absolutely everyone. And it's very important for us as well as for Trump. He needs not to just finish the war. He needs to make sure that Putin has no chance of coming back with a war against us. I believe this is the most important part, and everyone must admit that. Then it will be a victory.
For 3 years, Ukraine's president has tried to navigate his country through war. Now it will be his political rather than military strategy that will be put to the test. Caroline Lewis, ITV News.
Well, President Zelenskyy is clearly a wartime leader who is seeking a path to peace, trying to make sure that his voice and the voice of the Ukrainian people is the strongest and loudest when it comes to what will become of this country. But of course, when he speaks about what will happen to Ukraine in the months and years ahead, he does so knowing that actually it is people beyond the borders of this country who will make a difference to its future. So, namely President Trump and President Putin. In terms of President Trump, he was very cautious not to offer any direct criticism, which you can understand given the fact that America is such a big benefactor and protector to this country, and that's something that he wants to continue. And also because he knows that when it comes to peace talks, it is going to be the Americans and the new Trump administration that's going to have the biggest sway in this situation. The concern, I think, for Ukraine is that there will be conversations done between the White House and the Kremlin that may find some kind of mutually useful, beneficial deal for those two nations, but not for Ukraine itself. And that is why they are very guarded here about how they see things going forward. The whole issue for the Ukrainians is basically about security guarantees. What can they be given in way of security guarantee that will protect this country for the long term, for the future that it can build on, for a future as a sovereign nation that does not have the continual threat of Russia hanging over it? And I think that is something that they are incredibly aware of, not least because of the past 11 years. You know, it was 2014 when Russia first made their incursion into Crimea, and ever since there has been this ongoing conflict in the east. It's been something of a frozen conflict for many years, which then exploded back in 2022 when the full-scale invasion began. And that invasion has brought such loss and such devastation for this country. So many people have been killed and injured, both military and civilian. So much of the country's usual functioning has been disrupted, and so much of its land has been taken. And so what they want is to ensure that everything they've gone through since 2014, and particularly since 2022, is not in vain, that they don't agree to something at this point that basically means that things go quiet for a couple of months or years, and the next thing is Russia comes back with a vengeance. And that is the worry, and that came out over and over during the course of the interview. The other thing that struck me while speaking with President Zelenskyy was very much how he sees himself as a representative of the Ukrainian people. I asked him whether he would stand against President Trump if the deal was not good enough. And he said, well, it depended on what the Ukrainian people thought of that deal. He could stand against anybody, but not against those who elected him. And of course, that is quite a controversial subject at the moment, because Russia and the US are both pushing for elections in this country. President Zelenskyy says he can't do that because the country is in a state of martial law and is therefore not legal to hold elections here. And furthermore, I think his great fear is if elections were held, it would be a trap and there would be a Russian stooge put in, and that would really bring a very different path to the future for Ukraine. And then finally, in the conversations we had, I asked him, how did he feel about how long this war could go on and how long his military and the civilian population here could cope with it? And he looked pretty wistful at that point, and he said, well, what other option do they have? He understood that there has been huge sacrifice made by those serving and those who are just trying to get on with their normal lives here. But he said that the reality was, unless it continued until there was an acceptable peace, all of that would have been wasted and there would be no safe sovereign future for this country.